year ago in early winter, I went hiking for a weekend in a national park not far from home. It was supposed to be the last few days of good weather before the winter cold and snow came in, so I wanted to get out while I still could. There was a trail my buddy had told me about that went up to a nice view of a lake and wasn't crowded, so I decided to try it out. But when I got to the trail, it wasn't what I expected. There were no signs or markings. There was just a thin path going through some trees. I walked down a little ways, and while it still had no markings, it seemed like a straightforward trail to hike along. As I walked, it was clear that few people came this way. There were almost no shoe prints in the dirt, and the path didn't seem professionally made. This didn't frighten me or anything, but it was just something I took note of. The forest along the path was really nice though, full of wildlife and falling leaves from the changing season. About a mile in, I walked past something interesting. Another path leading off into the woods. I stayed on the trail, but I didn't really understand why there would be another path connecting to this already rarely used path. As I kept on walking though, more of these side trails started to show up. They went off in random directions, leading to what looked like nothing in particular. It was really odd. And then, after about 3 hours of walking, the trail I was on ended. Just like that, there was no more path to follow. All that was ahead was an endless row of trees and forest. And then out of nowhere, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see a guy walking in the distance. He had a ripped up jacket on and no backpack. And strangely, he was walking across the trail I was on, onto one of the side paths. It didn't look like he saw me. He was just looking down and walking. The way he walked though, and how he looked, made me a bit creeped out, so I made sure to not be seen as I watched him walk into the woods. By then, it looked like there wasn't much daylight left, and I decided to just abandon finding the lake and just hike back to my car. However, it only took me a few minutes to reach an intersection of paths that I didn't remember before. Immediately, I thought about how the one path ended so abruptly, and how that probably meant that at some point I went onto the wrong trail. I looked down, trying to see if there were any shoe prints of mine that I could follow, but I didn't see any. Then I heard it again, footsteps behind me. I turned and looked out into the forest. In the distance, that same man was standing and facing me. He didn't move or say anything. He just stood there as if he were watching me. After a moment, a chill ran through my body, and I turned to take whatever trail was in the opposite direction of the man. I quickly hurried, checking behind me multiple times, but after a few minutes, I'd lost track of the man. I went down this trail for over an hour, still worried about both being lost and the strange man. After a while of walking, I moved off the path and leaned against a tree, taking a break to drink some water, and not even a minute passed before I heard those same footsteps. I stayed where I was, behind the tree, as the sound of their shuffling steps got louder and louder, until the man walked right past the tree I was behind. He looked focused on the path ahead, like he thought I was still walking, but there was no doubt in my mind that he was following me, or at least trying to. Once he was gone, I took the opportunity to run back the way I'd came, getting to the intersection and choosing between two other paths that were in the right direction. Thankfully, I'd made the right choice, because halfway back to my car, all I had was the dim moonlight to guide me through the woods. All I can say is that that man I saw didn't look like he was out there just for a hike, and based on the way he was acting, I think he had some terrible intentions that I may have just barely avoided.